Welcome. In these weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, we have many things to be thankful for. Thankful for the bounty of food in this country. We'll ask why 40% of it goes to waste. Thankful to modern medicine. We'll ask why so many reject the flu vaccine. And thankful to our veterans. We'll ask why the civilian job interview can go badly. But first, thanks to our president and mayor-elect, PreK, the education of very young children, is high on the public agenda.
Let's make it a national priority to give every child access to a high-quality early education. Let's give our kids that chance. This is not babysitting. All right? This is teaching.
Research shows that providing free, high-quality early education to families in need is among the most effective ways to reduce income inequality, to increase social mobility, to raise college graduation rates, and to reduce crime.
So are those positive claims for early childhood education political rhetoric or scientific fact? Time for our weekly series, Public Intellectual, where we hear about research with the power to change our minds and public policy. Today, a study called Apples, which follows up on children from 31 high-poverty districts in New Jersey, kids who went to PreK back in 2004 and 5. In the state ranked first in PreK funding, New Jersey spends nearly 4 times per child what New York does on average. Did PreK make a lasting difference? Joining us via Skype, Milagros Nores, Associate Director of Research at the National Institute for Early Education Research. It's a unit of the Graduate School of Education at Rutgers University, which administers the Apples longitudinal study. Hello from Manhattan. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, Brian. Thank you very much for having me.
And let me put up an initial slide right away with your research findings. We'll look at a few of these and then we'll back out and discuss the big picture. So this is from the NJ Ask assessment. Tell us what we're looking at and why it's important.
So in the first 5 years of implementation of the Abbott preschools, which were mandated by the state as a consequence of a court case, the NIEER started to grab the cohort of children and follow them through time to see over time how did they evolve. And initially they saw, you could see very large effects, but with the 5th grade, which is the one that you're looking at, it was these effects that you see initially at kindergarten and in the 2nd grade, do they sustained over time. So what you're seeing is 2 groups. The bars in blue are the children that receive 1 year of preschool. The bars in red are the children that receive 2 years of preschool. And basically, how do they do in language and literacy in 4th and 5th grade, in math in 4th and 5th grade, and in science?
So what we're seeing here is the blue lines represent kids who had 1 year of PreK, and the red lines represent kids who had 2 years of PreK, going through language arts 4th and 5th grade, and math 4th and 5th grade, also science in 4th grade. Now, here in New York with Mayor-elect de Blasio, as you know, the big debate is whether he can even find the money for all the 4-year-olds for 1 year of PreK. You're telling us we maybe should have a second debate coming somewhere down the line about a 2nd year of PreK.
Well, yes, because the effects of 2 years of PreK is actually quite double what the effects of 1 year are showing over time in this particular case. And this is a very high quality PreK program. So if you think about programs that are a little more watered down, to even get to these effects, you have to either increase the intensity, duration, and the quality of it. So the combination makes for longer lasting effects.
So before we show any more data, talk about that concept of high quality PreK, because we could be throwing lots of good money away in New York or New Jersey or anywhere else on PreK that costs a lot but doesn't do much. What makes quality PreK in the sense of setting a child up for greater educational accomplishment down the road?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about New Jersey, what they did in terms of quality, which is pretty much what extends on all the, or is pretty much in line with what means high quality, which is high standards that include the ratios. How many children do you put in front of one or two adults? And that includes the qualifications. So do we require a BA degree for the main teacher and the assistant teacher? What do we require? Usually the high requirements are that they have an early child certification, not that they have a secondary education certification or anything else, but that it's very specialized to this particular group. That they have, so the ratio also allows for individualized and one-to-one programs. It's also important that they have a strong curriculum. Just putting the children in a space and give them toys, it doesn't do it. You really have to structure and provide the educational content. Has to be strong, and it has to be around several dimensions. So the children is supposed to grow in its cognitive dimension, its social, emotional, and executive functions, the way we regulate ourselves, the way we learn how to learn, and we learn memory and attention and persistence. And it has to do with the other the social and emotional, basically, and sometimes the physical also comes in line with that.
So let me stop you right there for a second, because part of what you're saying, I think, is that it's not so much that 3- and 4-year-olds are being taught how to read or how to add, but they're being taught how to learn.
Yes, it's the whole dimensionality of the child. So, for example, it's not only learning the alphabets it has a limit, but it's learning what to do with the alphabet and how the way that you learn and the way that you move forward in those dimensions. And the same way and having them early on, which predicts later on achievement in other cognitive dimensions. And then in the social emotional functions and the executive functions are all super important, because that is what provides or supports the learning over time and the development over time of the children. So do I follow instructions? Do I know what instruction is? Do I have the persistence to follow through? Do I have the attention, the memory? Do I know how to self-regulate myself and relative to others and to adults? Or do I just, have a tantrum when I feel like it?
It's socialization school as much as anything else.
It includes those pieces, and they're very important, yes.
Let's look at some more data. We're putting another chart up on the screen, and this is retention and special education. And again, we're seeing with PreK, with the blue bar, and without PreK with the red bar. In other words, more kids got retained or left back, more kids wound up in special ed if they didn't have PreK?
Yes, and it's not only that. If you really look at what is the gap between one and the other, the blue and the red, it means that the impact of PreK was about 37% on retention and about 30% on special ed. And those impacts, there's very few and very particular programs in which you're able to generate that impact on primary with a primary intervention.
Right, so that's a big impact. If you're looking, for example, at the chart on the left, between 12% who wound up in special ed or left back, and 19%, those without PreK, who wound up in special ed or left back, that's like a third difference, like you're saying, like over a 30% difference in the number of children who had that outcome. So over the course of, or spread out over a whole population of United States children, that's a gigantic impact.
And it's an impact that has a very strong direct impact on budgets at the local level as well.
Budgets?
Yes, but basically it's savings. It's savings at the local district level usually.
Because you don't have to spend on special ed, which is more expensive. You don't have to spend on whatever trouble the left back kids are going to get into, or just academically, because you don't have to educate them again a second year in the same grade.
Exactly, it's the second year of education, or the third or the fourth, because one child that was retained once is more likely to be retained more than once. Yeah.
Let's go on to another slide and look at another piece of data. And here we're seeing access by state. So the darker the green, folks, the more PreK there is. And so this is very surprising, Milagros, at least to me. Florida, Oklahoma, West Virginia, these would not be the progressive education leaders. And then right behind them, Texas of all places, and Georgia of all places. Am I seeing this right?
Yes, you are. And part of it is many of those states have gone universal. Florida has gone universal pre-K, so access to everyone, even if not that everyone doesn't enroll. Oklahoma, and there are other states like, well, Texas actually allows eligibility to be very flexible, so it doesn't require that very strict income eligibility piece that some of the other states have. So the more generous the state is in terms of not putting restrictions on who has access, the more likely people are to enroll. So basically, what this map is telling you, demand has to do also with how you put how stringent you get on the eligibility requirements and how willing you are to open up the program to everybody.
And do they have quality pre-K? Have people been able to study that, like you've studied the quality of pre-K and the impact that quality pre-K had in New Jersey? Are kids in Texas, kids in Florida, kids in Georgia getting high quality pre-K?
Well, that's the iffy part. Florida is very low on quality. Florida spends about what New York spends, about about 3,000 to 4,000. Very low, very lowly ranked. Oklahoma is higher in the rankings in terms of spending. It actually spends about 8,000 per child, and Georgia about 5,000 per child. So Georgia is actually pretty high on standards and quality, increasing over time, but still not at the Oklahoma levels. So there's if I put a variation of quality, the map would be maybe very different.
You're telling me that Oklahoma is very good?
Oklahoma is good in quality. It does have enrollments at 80%, so it's very high in enrollments, but it also accompanies that with 8,000 per child relative to what New Jersey, which is the highest quality one, and right now it's at 12,000. Low quality one varies around 2,000 to 4,000 per child. So Oklahoma is somewhere in the middle.
So these Apples kids, as they're known in New Jersey, what's their typical school day like? What happens?
Well, it's 6 hours a day, and they're in a classroom with 15 other children, or 14 in their case. They have two very qualified, well-paid teachers. Teachers are more closely paid to primary education teachers than many of the other states in which that's not the case. In many cases, where there is high Hispanic populations, there is a dual language support or programs accessible for children in these districts. The classrooms tend to have a very standard structure or good curriculum, so you'll see all types of activities that address all types of dimensions of the children, and you see individual one-to-one, full group, lots of interactions in small groups as well. Accompanied through the day. It's, as I said, 6 hours, which is considered full length, pretty much. And in addition to that, if children need wraparound services, what New Jersey districts did is make the two authorities, the education piece and the social and support and welfare piece, come together. So there's wraparound services. So the parents cannot come pick you up because they're likely working. There is wraparound services, so after the 6 hours of the educational more intense programs, they get an additional 2 to 3 or 4 hours of additional support and care if needed.
So what about the original Head Start kids, or generations now of Head Start kids? Because that's about 50 years old, isn't it? The original pre-K program for low-income kids. And you know, we always hear in these political debates about pre-K, well, the effects of Head Start wear off by second or third grade, so it's not really worth a lot of taxpayer money. Are there good numbers on that?
Well, the evidence on Head Start is not just that study. There's a longer and other pieces of study that don't really necessarily go hand in hand with what that study shows. So again, cherry picking that particular study to judge Head Start is a particular way of looking at research, but not necessarily the one I would put forward. But in addition to that, Head Start, when that particular study, which is so cited, came out, Head Start had not really put the last improvements in quality through. So the Head Start that study is not accompanied by an implementation and looking at quality. In the Apples study, we did look at quality through time and seeing what was happening in the classrooms. In this particular study, it's just the impact on children without really measuring if there were any standards that were really happening in terms of quality. So it's,
So are there better studies that you would put forward with
Well, I
respect to
would-
Head Start in particular?
There's some for early Head Start and some for Head Start that are earlier than that. And in addition to that, the Head Start study needs to be, in essence, looked as a piece of evidence on the whole world of evidence that there is out there. So if you replicated Head Start like it was at the moment of the study, you might be at that point. But if you're talking about high quality pre-K in general, Head Start shouldn't be what you're using as a measuring tool. It should be high quality programs and the evidence on high quality programs, and that in the overall landscape of evidence, which is very, very large. It's not small.
One other thing, I don't know if this is in your study, but the difference between half-day and full-day pre-K, because that's part of what's at issue in New York. There's already half-day pre-K available under the law, and not all the parents who are eligible sign their kids up. Mayor-elect de Blasio says full-day pre-K would make a world of difference. Is there data to back that up?
Well, the Abbott has full day and wraparound. So part of it is the reason is if you don't have wraparound, you don't solve the issues that parents still need to have the children and cannot pick them up in the middle of the day.
But is that daycare or is that education?
No, that's daycare. It's usually the wraparound is daycare. But we do have a study that we did for Chicago, and we specifically looked at half day, full day. Now, the problem with that study is that we're at the point of we did the reporting, we haven't published the results as a study itself. But in the Chicago case, we looked at half day, full day, and we did find a stronger effect on impact on quality. I mean, on children for being in full day, with the same level of quality, but just different amount of hours. So the classrooms look pretty much the same. And it was randomized trial as well. So the full day does provide you, again, it's the intensity, duration, sort of like the 1 year versus 2 year pre-K. What are you going to get at the other side of that coin? Is the half day to full day evidence seems to push towards you will get a greater effect kind of argument.
I think we've seen from the videos of Bill de Blasio and President Obama and the data graphics that you've shown us that there is a very small amount of high quality pre-K in the United States, or a relatively small amount, but this is a national movement. The president is talking about it. Mayor-elect de Blasio is making national headlines for making this his central issue. This is a national movement, and I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about it over the next however long it takes to make this almost universal in the United States. Is that what you think?
Well, I'm hoping that that's where we're going. At least if some states continue to not provide anything, that the fact that the states are moving forward and if they can get federal support to do it moving forward even faster and stronger, that the evidence that will come out from just those states is going to push the rest of the country forward. Otherwise, we're lagging behind many, many countries that are doing this and faster and moving in that direction, including even newer countries that are jumping on the pre-K piece like China.
So it's got great national significance, potentially, if Mayor de Blasio is able to get his program into place. Obviously, we'll be watching it here in New York, and I think America and the world will be watching too. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Up next, 25 stupid reasons not to get the flu shot. It's that time of the year when we should all be getting vaccinated against influenza. The flu can make you miserable with fever, chills, sore throat, aching muscles, and more. If you're a senior or a young child or have asthma or other lung disease, it can be life-threatening. But many are afraid to roll up a sleeve and get the vaccine. How come? What do they believe exactly? Our next guest says there are 25 strains or myths about the flu shot floating in the air. Joining us via Skype from Illinois is health journalist Tara Haelle. Tara, hello from New York.
Hi there. How are you guys doing?
Good. We'll go through as many of these as we can, but that's a nice round number to start out with, 25.
Right.
So go ahead.
I was going to say that was actually lucky. I originally had tallied up 23, and then I heard someone say something about the side effects being worse than the flu itself, so I added that as 24. And I mentioned on Facebook that I was finishing up the column that I was working on, and one of my former high school students said, "Oh, my husband got Bell's palsy from the from the flu vaccine." So I added that one, and it was a nice round 25.
So that brings us to your myth number 1, which is the flu vaccine gives you the flu or makes you sick. Does it do that to nobody?
Well, with the flu shot, the one that goes in your arm, it's scientifically impossible. It's a dead vaccine, so it can't give you the flu. What usually happens is that the flu vaccine does have side effects, and some people can get fever, chills, a cough, and they just feel lousy for a couple days while their immune system is ramping up. So they mistake that for being sick. Or they do get the flu, but it's just a coincidence. They got the flu before they got the shot, and it takes 1 to 2 weeks sometimes to actually have clinical symptoms. So it's either a coincidence or they're mistaking the side effects for a full-fledged pathogen that their body's fighting, which is not the case.
So let's jump ahead to myth number 12, which is the flu vaccine weakens your body's immune response. Does it not?
No, it's the whole point of the vaccine is to get your immune system ready to fight the flu. So it does the exact opposite. You get the flu vaccine and your body says, ooh, those are things that we want to fight. And so it ramps up, makes all the antibodies that are ready to fight the flu if the real deal comes along. So it actually strengthens your immune system in preparing you to fight the vaccine, to fight, not the vaccine, to fight the flu if you encounter the strains that your body's ready to fight.
Where did that myth come from? At least with the first one we went over, there can be some side effects. You can feel kind of sick for a day, although most people don't. I've gotten the flu shot every year for many years, and I've never had even the tiniest feeling of illness from it as a result, sample of 1. But you can have some of that, sickness feeling in a mild way, but weakens the immune system. Where did that even come from? It's such a myth.
I think it came from other myths about vaccines. That's actually a very common myth about other vaccines among the people who are anti-vaccination advocates in the first place. They believe that all the vaccines weaken your body or cause autoimmune diseases, and that's a very common misconception among people who are afraid of vaccines in general. So I think it's actually borrowed from the larger body of anti-vaccine rhetoric.
Important one, myth number 16 on your list. People don't die from the flu unless they have another underlying condition already. Is that a myth? It is the most dangerous to people with underlying lung conditions, correct?
Correct. Well, underlying lung or neurological conditions, actually.
Okay.
So yes, if you have underlying conditions, or if you're a child or you're the elderly, then you are certainly at higher risk. But healthy people do die from the flu. Now, it's not common, but it happens. Among the children who died from the flu between 2004 and 2012, 43% of them had no underlying conditions. And I actually have interviewed families who have lost people to the flu. There's a wonderful organization called Families Fighting Flu. And if you visit that website, you'll see stories of young, healthy people, football players that were healthy and had no underlying conditions, got the flu, developed complications, and died from it.
40%. You said 40% of those who died from flu had no underlying. That's a large number.
Yeah, that was the children. That was 43% of children.
Even so. Now, I noticed that when I get the flu shot, I'm asked to fill out a form and check off whether I have a certain number of risk factors. And one of them is if I'm allergic to eggs. And yet your myth number 17 is that people with egg allergies cannot get the flu shot. It will kill them. So which is it? They do ask me when I get my flu shot if I'm allergic to eggs. Are you telling us it doesn't matter?
Well, according to the American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, it is the amount of egg protein that is in the flu shot is so small that it should not trigger a response. Now, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not an immunologist, and I'm not an allergist. So if someone came to me and said, I have an egg allergy, should I get the flu shot? My answer would be, go talk to your allergist, go talk to your doctor. But that's what the official American College of Asthma and Allergy states. So that's based on the evidence that they have gathered. Regardless, there's now a new vaccine called Flublok that's not made with any egg proteins at all. So the whole question will hopefully be bypassed now because people will have that option.
Myth number 18, if I get the flu, antibiotics will take care of me. So not to worry.
Yeah, well, you can take all the antibiotics you want, and they might go crazy fighting all kinds of bacteria in your body. But bacteria and viruses are very different pathogens, and influenza is a virus. So only antivirals can fight influenza. There are antivirals that are designed to fight influenza. The data on their effectiveness varies, but antibiotics are not going to do anything for you.
Myth number 20. I never get the flu, so I don't need the shot. Are there people who are just more naturally immune than others? We all know those people. We hate those people. They go through every winter and they never get sick. And some of them have never gotten flu shots.
It is certainly possible that someone has an exceptional immune system or has a lower risk just naturally from getting the flu. But what they neglect to realize is that you can have a subclinical infection, and what that means is that you're infected and the clinical symptoms never show up, but you're still a carrier. So you can still put other people at risk during that time. And even aside from that, my general response is, do you wear a seatbelt in the car even if you've never been in an accident before? Because just because you've never gotten the flu doesn't mean that you never will get the flu.
That carrier thing is actually new to me. I didn't know about that with respect to the flu. So there are people walking around apparently completely healthy, but they are carrying the flu virus on their fingertips or whatever, and even they don't know it and they're passing it on?
That's possible, yes. It's not very common based on the studies that we have so far. And the flu has a low R number, which is the number of people that you would infect during the time that you're infectious. It's usually about 2 people, but it's still possible. So if you're, say, a person who's, this is one of the reasons healthcare workers are encouraged to get the flu shot, or sometimes required to, because they're around a lot of people whose immune systems are compromised. So it would be basically irresponsible for them to be taking care of these people and be at risk for transmitting that virus.
Myth number 21, I can protect myself from the flu by eating right and washing my hands regularly. Now, what about that hand washing, or what about using that hand sanitizer, which seems to be in dispensers on the way through every door in the workplace these days, Purell,
Right.
things like that?
Well, the hand sanitizer is killing bacteria. It says, I think it says actually on the package, it'll kill 99.9% of bacteria. But again, a virus is not bacteria. So I'm not aware of any studies, although to be honest, I haven't looked about whether hand sanitizer can kill the flu virus, but the flu virus is airborne in any case. So hand washing is an excellent hygienic activity, and it will protect you from other types of illnesses, other germs, which could weaken your system and make it more likely that you catch the flu. So it's still important, just as eating right is important to keep your body strong, but they can't prevent you from inhaling the airborne influenza virus.
Aha, because the flu virus is airborne.
Exactly.
So instead of worrying about washing your hands so much for this, you should not breathe, haha, or wear a mask all the time.
That's one of the reasons that you'll have people who are healthcare workers who refuse to get the shot are often required to wear a mask for that reason.
Interesting. So we did the myth earlier that getting the flu vaccine will weaken your immune system. Here's number 22. It's okay if I get the flu because it will make my immune system stronger. These myths run in both directions.
Exactly. There's a couple of things about this one. For one thing, while your body is fighting the flu vaccine, or excuse me, while your body is fighting the flu, it's not going to make your immune system stronger because your immune system is occupied fighting it. Now, after you recover from the flu, you will have an immunity to that particular strain, but the odds that you're going to encounter that strain again are pretty slim. And in the meantime, you have contributed to the possibility of infecting other people. One of the reasons it's important for even healthy people who are not at high risk for complications to get the flu shot is to protect those around us and build up herd immunity, which means the more people that are immune against a particular disease, a particular pathogen in a community, then the less likely it is that the infection can travel through. There's no vectors, there's no people for it to pass through. So the more of us that are immune, the more of us that are vaccinated, the less likely it is that that disease can travel through and hit the most vulnerable people.
So just like if you're a young, healthy person buying health insurance and contributing to the overall affordability of health insurance that way, that's certainly been in the news, you're also being a good citizen if you're a healthy person and contributing to community immunity by getting your shot.
Exactly. I like that analogy. I might steal it.
Feel free, just give me credit.
I will.
I'm going to throw in one of my own, and I haven't seen your entire list of 25, so maybe it's on there.
Okay.
I'm going to give you myth number 26. The flu vaccine hurts. The flu vaccine is the tiniest little prick in your arm that you will ever feel. It's like nothing, people. Did you include that one?
I did not include that one because I think people have different levels of pain thresholds. So I couldn't legitimately call that a myth. Some people, it might just hurt them more. But I would agree that it doesn't, there's definitely other shots I've gotten that hurt a lot more. So that's not one of my concerns when I go to get it. And honestly, if they're afraid of needles or they think it hurts, they can get the flu mist, which is an inhaled vaccine.
They have that?
Yeah, you can inhale. It's not recommended for pregnant women, for children under 2, and there may be an advisory against elderly. I'm not sure, but anybody else between 2 and 65 can get the flu mist, and that's actually what I gave my son because the flu mist is a live vaccine and it's more effective for kids aged 2 to 7 than the shot is. So that's what my son. And my son actually thought it was fun. It was a game to him. He's only 3, so he enjoyed sniffing up, his vaccine.
So real quick, bottom line to moms. How did they choose? Because there's an extra little risk, or is that a myth with a live vaccine?
Well, a live vaccine is going to have a higher risk for moms who are pregnant, which is why it's not recommended. But it's not an extra risk in terms of the side effects for kids. That's why they say for kids over age 2. But for the side effects for both the flu mist and the shot are considered comparable in kids age 2 and older. And like I said, it's actually a more effective vaccine for kids between the ages of 2 and 7. They're not really sure why, but for some reason, the effectiveness tapers off at about age 7 compared to the shot. So that's based on the research that we have so far. So that's why my son's 3. That's why I got him the flu mist.
Well, thanks for joining us with your 25 myths about the flu vaccine. Hope you get through the winter without catching it yourself.
Thank you very much. I got my flu shot, so.
Look at the appreciative crowds all along Fifth Avenue on Monday. And it's clear our veterans, young and old, are appreciated, at least on Veterans Day. The floats say thanks, so does the clapping. But a sobering fact from the Bureau of Labor Statistics: the unemployment rate for vets who served during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars is just under 10%, 2 points higher than the population at large. 28% of vets from this era report suffering from a disability, twice the rate of older vets. Our next guest is trying to help these veterans get good work. Michelle Tillis Lederman is an executive coach, founder of the consulting firm Executive Essentials, and the author of a free ebook for veterans called Heroes Get Hired: How to Use Your Military Experience to Master the Interview. She joins us via Skype. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
Good. So there are many steps to getting a job for vets or anyone else, obviously. Why did you decide to focus your book on mastering the interview?
We can do a lot on the job search, and there's so many different organizations that are going to help us get our foot in the door, but that's as far as they can take us. We have to take ourselves the rest of the way, and that's where the interview comes into play.
Is the military protocol for how you talk to your supervisor, yes sir, no sir, different from civilian life enough that it presents a risk during a job interview?
It does. There's a lot of cultural differences that the veterans are going to have to get accustomed to in the civilian workforce, one of which is the language that they choose. There's certain social etiquette that they need to get accustomed to. For example, no, yes sir, yes ma'am. You are allowed to extend your hand for a handshake and to be the first one to do that. You can also initiate small talk, and actually you really should initiate small talk and build that rapport. And I know that's a big shift from what you're used to.
Are there certain strengths that veterans can bring to the civilian workforce that in general they can tout?
That is a much, much longer list. One of the things that I'm really trying to promote in the veteran thinking and the mindset is that you already have so many of the skills that civilian workplaces are looking for. It's that dedicated work ethic. It is the organization, it's the ability to communicate, it's to adapt under pressure, it's to work in stressful situations, it's to be able to work with diverse teams. I mean, the list goes on and on.
How about being dead honest, straightforward?
You know, it can, and it depends on the culture of the organization. And it depends on who you're talking to. You really need to pick up on the cues of the person who is sitting across the desk from you as to, is that a little bit too much for them? Are they kind of backing up on you? Or are they like, oh yeah, that's great. So you want to look for if it's working for them.
Good tip. Your book comes with a collection of instructional videos. Let's look at part of one right now. This is a vet you profiled, Specialist Phoebe Gavin. This excerpt is about her fear of getting stereotyped by potential employers because of her military experience. Check it out.
When you are transitioning out of the military, it's easy to kind of get pigeonholed into that you must be very serious because the military is very serious and you stand at attention. But people in the military have great senses of humor, and people in the military make short films, and people in the military do all sorts of crazy things that really lend themselves to creative industries. So as someone who's interested in creative industry, it's really easy for me to parlay the soft skills that I learned in the military, like being confident, being a leader, being organized, being proactive, doing a whole lot with nothing. Those are things that no matter what field you want to go into, those are helpful. I am a senior. I'm graduating in the spring. I am going to be taking a really big internship for the spring, and then hopefully that internship will turn into a full-time position. And if it doesn't, then I'll be on the job market. In the military, you are judged based on what you do and not as much about who you are. But when you're sitting in an interview room with a potential employer, they want to know about who you are just as much as they want to know about what you can do. So it's important to show some of your personality. It's important to show some of your individuality. It's important to show that you're somebody that that person wants to work with. They want to spend 40 hours a week with you.
She's great. I'm sure she'd be extremely attractive to many employers. She's got such a great way. But she talked at the beginning of that clip about the issue of being perceived as serious, or an assumption, a stereotype, a pigeonholing, that vets are very serious. Is that a common thing?
First of all, I love Phoebe. Right? Fabulous energy, and there's so many points that she made that are spot on. But to your question, is that seriousness, you know, it depends on the person. Phoebe does not exude that perception, but yeah, I mean, people who don't have military experience, they have one image. They have, you know, the at attention, the stiff, and they sit with their hands in their lap and you know, with a very sit back. One of the things I talk about in the book is how to make slight tweaks. And since you can see me, instead of just being stiff, we're just going to bring the shoulders down a little bit, still with a broad chest, but a little bit more relaxed. And those small tweaks can help disabuse the potential employer of this misperception that the military veterans are stiff.
How about those fun eyeglasses she was wearing with the bright pink arms? Was that a way of communicating, I'm not that serious?
You know, I've always felt that what you wear does have an impact on how somebody perceives you. I think for the interview, you want to stay conservative. I give a laundry list of things of, you know, what to wear, what colors, and everything to think about with the attire. But I love the idea of having one little personality thing. It could be a pin, it could be the color of your tie, it could be a piece of jewelry for a woman, or for Phoebe, for her glasses, that can give a little bit of the personality. And that's the point I really want to emphasize that she makes, that you really do want to show who you are. And one easy way also to get rid of that stiff stereotype is smile. Just smile. And it will help a lot.
Always a great tip for veterans or non-veterans. Can I ask you about veterans with disabilities? I mentioned the stat at the top that 28%, that's over a quarter of Iraq and Afghanistan era vets, report having some kind of a disability. Should they be honest about this? Should they be forthcoming? Should they volunteer whatever their disability might be?
It is really up to the veteran, their comfort level. I always say the first thing you need to know is your rights. And the American with Disabilities Act gives you the right to not share any information that you're not comfortable sharing. So I always leave it in their hands. However, if that disability is going to impact your ability to do the job fully, then absolutely you need to disclose it, not just for them as a company, but for you and your effectiveness in the role. So absolutely choose your timing. A lot of times the disabilities, and I've heard the statistic, about 66% of disabilities are related to hearing and hearing loss. And that's a really simple accommodation that you might be able to request in the interview. They might have a question which is completely appropriate, which is, are there any issues that you have faced that will keep you from being fully effective on the job? That's a great opening question for you to bring up the fact that you might have a challenge with being near a window, or you prefer to be in a quiet environment, or that you might need to be in a closed space, or whatever it is that you are looking for an accommodation. Think about that and give them some ideas of how they can help you.
When should you and when shouldn't you tell war stories?
Well, in the interview, they are going to ask you questions like, tell me about a time when. And what we're also trying to teach is the interviewer how to ask more appropriate questions. Because if you say, tell your most this or your most extreme that, that's really not the story they should be hearing in the interview. And the candidate wants to be able to think about, what are they trying to learn about me? And what's the best story that can fit that? Really not what they're asking is the extreme story, but the story that shows the skills they're looking for. So I wouldn't necessarily shock anybody on the interview.
It sounds like there needs to be a whole other ebook, and maybe there is one for all I know, for employers on that side of the interview.
It's something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, so that you don't say, what's the worst thing you saw in Afghanistan or something like that.
Do you know, I heard a statistic that 1/3 of all veterans are being asked the question, have you shot anyone? And, Phoebe shared actually she said that 1/3 of her personal interviews were that way as well. And one of the things I do talk about in the book is how do you handle those very inappropriate questions? And what I always say is, I want you to be able to decide if you want the job, not let them decide for you. So I want you to be able to handle anything with grace. And so there's a technique that I share called extract and redirect. And that's if they ask you a question that is inappropriate or you're not comfortable answering, you're going to extract yourself by talking about something general. So if they say, have you shot anybody? You might say, there's a misperception that a lot of people, only this percentage of people actually face combat. My unit was responsible for X, Y, and Z. And that second part is the redirection. So you're going to extract yourself by saying something in the realm of the topic and then redirect them to something related to the job.
All right, vets, it's a free online ebook complete with a gallery of instructional videos on mastering the interview. HeroesGetHired.com. Michelle Lederman, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
As Thanksgiving approaches, we are grateful for the bounty of food in this country, and we would not waste food, at least not knowingly. But who among us hasn't thrown out an unopened container because the date stamp on it said sell by, or best before, or enjoy by last month? Well, it's not always the right thing to do. Turns out America wastes countless tons of food because these labels are poorly understood and surprisingly underregulated. This ambiguity squanders resources and money and food that might feed the hungry. That's the conclusion of a joint report by Harvard and the NRDC, the Environmental Group Natural Resources Defense Council. The food dating issue is part of a larger problem, that an estimated 40% of food in the U.S. goes uneaten. So what can be done? Joining us via Skype, the lead author of The Dating Game report, Emily Broad-Lieb. She directs the Harvard Law School Food Law and Policy Clinic. And with us here in New York, Sasha Lutzi, policy advocate with the NRDC's Food and Agriculture Program. Welcome to both of you. Hi.
Thanks. Hi.
Hi, Brian. Thank you.
And Emily, let me just jump right in with what a lot of people are probably thinking already. hey, better safe than sorry. So if I see that sell-by date or whichever version of it is on my label and that date has passed, I'm just going to be throwing it out just to be safe. Why not?
I think that's a really good point. Well, this is sort of one of the problems. People hear about all of these foodborne illness problems, and what they don't realize is that those dates have really nothing to do with safety at all. They were intended as a way to indicate freshness to consumers, and really they're just an estimate, the best estimate that manufacturers can make of when that food is going to be at its top quality. So I think, you know, I understand that inclination, but if they're not related to safety at all, you're wasting money, you're wasting food, and you're not necessarily making yourself safer.
Is it just a commercial thing? Because that's my suspicion. I have no idea whether it's true, that they put very early sell-by dates and other kinds of dates on there because they know there's going to be a percentage of it that's thrown out and people are going to go out and buy the product more often. Is that a factor?
Well, that's a good question. We've been asked that a few times. There's no real evidence that that's actually happening, but I think you know, sort of tied with that is that companies want you to eat their food when it's at its, you know, when it tastes its best. It's really helpful for them that you have a good experience of it, and that's a valid concern of companies. But I think it means that the labels need to be clearer so that consumers know that that's what's going on and can make their own decision. So regardless of, you know, what other benefits there are to companies, I think really just people thinking that they don't know what will happen if you eat something after that date. And what we found is really 90% of consumers have said that they throw food away on that date because they're either confused or they're afraid of safety issues. So it's really leading to a lot of food getting thrown in the trash.
Sasha, do you have any different answer to that same question? And who is responsible for these sell-by dates, you know, expiration dates, best before dates?
Yeah, well, people clearly think that there is someone responsible on high and who's regulating this. And what we found, this was the first ever, we believe, legal analysis of the real patchwork and web, this confusing web of regulations across all 50 states at the federal level. And what we found was that it's really the Wild West. No wonder, as Emily said, 90% of consumers are confused and they're throwing food away prematurely. So who's responsible? You know, we think that a lot of people could do a better job. We think that the government could do a better job. Manufacturers could do a better job.
Are you saying that it's at the state level? So the same food might have a date for, you know, one state that's earlier than a date for the next nearby state?
That's right. It's even worse than that. You know, for example, we're here in New York. So New York doesn't actually have a requirement to place dates on food. But in the surrounding states around New York, in New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, those states do have requirements. Those requirements can be different. So really, there's no consistent definition for terms like sell by, use by, best by. There's no transparent way that manufacturers are calculating those dates. It's really often just up to the manufacturer what they want to stamp on the product. And sometimes you see a date without any words even.
So to that point, we're going to put a map up on the screen.
Yeah.
And Sasha, we'll stay with you for this. Tell us what two maps up, you know, one above the other. What are we looking at here?
I think we're looking at that Wild West scenario that I just described, where I think, you know.
What are the states in orange? What are the states in gray?
The states in orange are the states that require date labels on at least some food products. And the ones in gray are the ones that do not. I don't think that the problem is with dates in and of themselves. I think the problem is just that it's so confusing. If you don't want to take my word for it, we like to tell people to go into their local store and just pick a product, pick milk or orange juice or whatever, and just take a look. You're going to find different phrases and different dates stamped even within the same company's products. If you look at a liter versus a half liter, for example, it's really very confusing.
But if we look at the lower map, let's get this up for just another second. The lower map in orange is the states that actually enforce in some way these sell by, best by, enjoy by dates. Emily, is the small number of states actually enforcing here a problem?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good question. We started doing this work in Massachusetts, which, as you might be able to tell from the map, is one of the strictest states. I think Massachusetts and Washington, D.C. are really strict in terms of what things require label, and then in terms of making it difficult for people to sell or even donate food after those dates. And so I think we don't have the sort of capacity in this study really to look at what the impact is on waste. But I think that because these dates aren't really linked with food safety, because the regulations haven't been science-based, then to restrict sales of food after those dates seems to me to be, really overly protective and not really improving food safety. And I think the real challenge is the states that are nearby, like the New Yorks that don't have any regulation, they suffer, but because the companies are just trying to meet whatever requirements are from nearby. And you wouldn't go to any store in New York and see any less date labeling on food than you would see in states that have the most strict requirements.
Right, because in the region, Sasha, if a company sells in New York and New Jersey, then they would go by those tougher New Jersey standards.
That's exactly right.
Just so they can sell.
That's exactly right.
Region-wide. But do I understand correctly that you think too much enforcement is actually more of a problem here than too little enforcement?
I think the real problem is the lack of consistency and clarity. I think, at the heart of the recommendations we make is that we need a system that distinguishes between dates that are about quality, peak quality, that are sort of part of the manufacturer trying to make that experience of eating their food as good as it can be for you, and dates that actually have to do with food safety. So right now, it's so muddled that people are throwing away food because of food safety fears, when really the food is perfectly good to eat. So I think that distinction has to be made, and there needs to be just a lot more transparency and clearer definitions. If we had that clearer, more consistent system and better enforcement of it, I think we'd have a lot less food waste.
Emily, what else? What should the actual recommendations be for a good system?
Yeah, I think Sasha was right on, and I think for 99% of the food supply, as we've said, this is a quality issue. Let's just make that crystal clear to people. There shouldn't be, as Sasha mentioned, different foods with different wording on them and some with no wording. There should just be one standard, phrase that's used. Peak quality before, best taste before, something that's very crystal clear to consumers. And if you want to have a date on your food, use that date. For the 1% of food where there could be some safety risk, and that I can only think of really deli meats being the one food where actually they could have been previously contaminated, and if so, want to get rid of them after a certain number of days. Let's be clear about that too. There's no reason to hide the ball on these two different things.
Is there a difference between Sellby and Enjoy By and Best Buy? To the people who know what the difference is, do they, Sasha, do they mean anything?
I know Emily's internet has been cutting out, but what she was trying to say was that the only place where that's really true, where there's a consistent meaning really, is with the sell-by dates. That's really a business-to-business communication between the manufacturer and the retailer that's stocking their food. And it's really saying that if you sell it by this date, when the consumer brings it home, there's still going to be some time that food can be in the consumer's home, during which it'll still be at its peak quality. But unfortunately, I think people misunderstand what that really means, and they think that food on that date or the date after becomes unsafe to eat. And we even found in a non-scientific survey of workers in grocery stores that even they don't understand what those dates mean, and they'll often pull food off of the shelf quite prematurely. We estimate that there's $900 million worth of food that's lost within the supply chain every year.
Well, sell-by sounds very precise and prescriptive as an instruction for a grocery store. Sell-by.
Yeah, I think the problem is that in this web of different dates, consumers read it again as they infer something about food safety, that the day after that or soon after that date, that food will be spoiled or unsafe for them to eat.
So this is one piece of American food waste.
Yes.
Where does it fit into a bigger picture?
Yeah, so we love to bust this myth about food dates, but it really is part of a bigger whole. So today in the United States, 40% of the food that we grow doesn't get eaten. And that waste is happening across the supply chain, from the farm through the transportation of the food, inside the grocery stores, at restaurants, and a lot of it is happening in our homes. So this issue with the date labeling is one piece of this puzzle. It's one factor contributing to a lot of good food being thrown away, but there's really a much bigger story here where, I like to use the analogy of imagine going to the grocery store and buying 3 heaping bags of groceries and just walking to your car with them, dropping one on the ground and never stopping to pick it up. That's essentially what is happening in our food system.
It's unbelievable considering the hunger even in our own country.
That's a very good point. NRDC is interested in this issue because of the tremendous resources that go into growing our food. So agriculture uses half of our land, 80% of our fresh water. It's the largest contributor to landfills. A tremendous amount of chemicals, fertilizers, pesticides, water, energy goes into producing our food. And when we throw it away, we're throwing away all those resources. But you're right. I think there's also a real moral challenge here. This is all happening at a time when 1 in 6 Americans is food insecure. So that means that at any given point during the year, they might not be able to secure the food they need.
Emily, as a matter of policy, is any country doing this better than us that you know of?
Well, I think that's a great question. We're really, that's something we're starting to look into a little bit more. On the date labeling, we talk a little bit in the report about the United Kingdom, which is really ramping up and trying to address this. I think what we're seeing is a lot of governments trying to take action. And in the U.S., the federal government, the USDA and the EPA together and separately have initiatives to address this. But I think that we really fall short on the expiration dates because we're not providing any clear guidance to people. And one thing we found with this report was so many consumers were really eager to find out, well, I'm wasting all this food, what can I do differently? But what we need is a policy change so that we don't have to be reiterating the same findings every year to remind people again, don't throw that food away, it's not bad. We need a better system for the future.
And so I come back to where I started. How should an individual whose consciousness has been raised by this a little bit, but still sees that label that says yesterday, and they go, I don't know, how can you judge?
Yes, that's a very good question, and I want to say first and foremost that this is not meant to make anyone feel guilty. I know for a fact there are some peppers that are going bad in my refrigerator right now, so this is not meant to be a guilt trip for anyone. We are just trying to raise awareness because in addition to food being thrown away, people are throwing a lot of money away, and people, as Emily said, sort of in this era of tight budgets don't want to be doing that. So there's lots of tips that we try and provide people. The one that I like to lead with is to come back to a time when we trust our own senses. I think a lot of times you can open up your milk and smell it, and you'll know if it's bad. You should trust your nose. I think beyond that, the freezer is your friend. Most foods can be frozen, and they keep really well. I think Thanksgiving is coming up, and we've been thinking a lot about sort of food waste avoidance tips around Thanksgiving since it's such a food-centric holiday. And some things that we've thought about is that a lot of people right now are ordering their turkeys, and they tend to order turkeys without considering how much other food is going to be at the table. So they tend to over-order these giant birds, and we haven't crunched the numbers for this year, but last year we found that Americans are going to waste $280 million in discarded turkey. So think about all those sides that are going to be on the table and maybe order a slightly smaller bird.
But if there's no mold on my 1985 Twinkie, that's a bad thing, right?
You shouldn't have a 1985 Twinkie. Or
Thank you both very much for joining us. And
Thanks.
early happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
And that's our program for today. We premiere a new program each week at this hour. Next time, Latino New York, 100 years of El Diario, and facing discrimination while house hunting in New York. And tune into my daily radio show, weekdays, 10 a.m. to noon on WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820. Tomorrow, the renowned economist Padma Desai on 50 years of globalization and her life as an Indian immigrant. I'm Brian Lehrer. Thanks for watching.